Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are entering into the 24th lecture of this course. The title of the lecture is Sampling and its Purposes. So, after completing the research design, the various aspects of research design, we have now entered into the sampling. What is sampling? While conducting a survey, a question is usually asked: should all or the entire population be studied, or only a limited number of persons drawn from the total population be studied, and then extend our findings, generalize our findings for the all of the population, entire population. In the statistical terminology, population refers to all those people with the characteristics which the researcher wants to study within the context of a particular research problem. So, if suppose we are studying the satisfaction level of students from the teaching at any department, then all the students enrolled in that department constitute the population of the study. Whereas, if we study the same project, level of satisfaction of students from the teaching at the university level, then what happens? All those students who are enrolled in the university, they constitute population here. So, the concept of population in technical terms that we use in research, it is also called universe also. It is called universe also. That population or universe, I am sure it is clear to us. So, what is a sample? A sample is a portion of people drawn from a larger population. It would represent the population if it has the same basic characteristics of the population from which it is drawn. So, suppose we have decided to make a sample. The population is very large. All entire population cannot be studied. So, we decided that the sample should be made for the study. So, what is sample? Sample is a part of the population which is developed or created from the members of the population. However, the condition is that the sample which we have made is to a very large extent representative of the population, because the results of the sample have to be generalized for whole of the population. So, if the sample is not representative of the characteristics of the population, then the generalization may also not be proper. So, the beauty of making the sample lies in the selection of the members in such a way that the sample is representative of the population, because the findings have to be generalized. So, our concern in sampling is not about what types of persons or units have to be observed, but with how many units of what particular description and by what method the sample has to be chosen. So, in this example, suppose in a locality large number of thefts have taken place in a area of 3 square kilometers. So, we have made it, or it is made of say 7 or 10 small localities, sub-localities. Each of them consists of equal number of lanes and each having say 20 houses from one side and 20 from the other side. Thus, we find that here there are 1500 households. So, whether all people or just a sample need to be studied in a survey depends on these below mentioned factors. How quickly are data needed? What is the time span of collection of the data? Because after all, as large population, as more and more time is required to collect the data. So, the time that we have been given in the project also matters a lot for the sample. Also, what type of survey is planned? Is it going to be a telephonic survey or a self-administered questionnaire sent by post or through an investigator, or it is going to be a schedule in which answers to questions are to be filled in by the investigator himself? These are the things which would determine whether all population should be studied or just a sample of the population is studied. Further, what are the available resources? Is there money to appoint an investigator and to get the questionnaire printed cyclo-style? Do all people have telephones? That is also a considerable point, important point, the availability of resources. What we have to do, whether we have to study the whole population, that is called census also, or study the a small part of the population, that is called survey. So, and of course, census is always not possible, because if the census is possible only for the government to do, and the government also does in once 10 years, that is to approach each and every citizen of the country. So, in other projects, census is not possible, because it requires lot of finance. So, we have to take care of that in deciding whether we are going for a census or whether we are going to for a survey, whether we are going to study the whole population or whether we have decided to study a part of the population, that is sample. Also, how credible the findings of the results would be. In the example, even if 70 to 80% of households agree to participate in the night watch program, it could be said that survey was representative of the neighborhood. If, however, if a smaller percentage wants to participate, it would be preferable to scrap such a survey. Further, how familiar is the researcher with sampling methods? Of course, that has to be removed by giving proper training to the researcher for collection of the sample. While studying the sample, we have to keep in mind a sample is a part of the population which is studied in order to make inferences about the whole population. In defining the population from which the sample is taken, it is necessary to identify target population and sampling frame. In defining the population from which the sample is taken, it is necessary to identify of course, the target population and the sampling frame. So, let me add that. The population are of, say, many types. One population is infinite. Suppose we are studying the salinity in the sea, in any of the seas, oceans. Then if we are doing that, we have here an infinite population. So, we cannot proceed to study the whole of the population, that is whole of the sea, collecting the salts to check the salinity. No. The researcher has to decide to go for the samples. Of course, he has to collect the samples in such a way that these samples do represent the salinity level of the population, that is sea or ocean. So, in this case, sampling is must. Sampling is must because the population is infinite. We cannot go on, the research cannot go on to studying all of the population. So, one must be very clear that if the population is infinite, there is no alternative but to make the sample and study the project or study the problem through making sample or samples. But suppose the population is finite, that is countable, but it is large or very large. Like if we want to study the level of satisfaction by teaching in a university has 50,000, 1 lakh students. So, if we opt for studying the whole population, it is not feasible to collect data from 1 lakh students about their satisfaction level from the teaching at the university. So, one has to go for the sample. The researcher has to decide that he would be making samples for the study. Of course, the sample has to be made in a way that it represents, it encompasses all the characters of the population, so that the sample is to be studied and the findings of the sample are to be generalized for whole of the population. So, if we are studying say 2500, making a sample of 2500 students out of the 1 lakh, and then studying this sample, finding the conclusion, then we have to generalize these findings for whole of the population. So, this is why this sample has to be made in such a way that it imbibes most of the characters of the population. So, that was the finite and large population. Now, take the example of satisfaction level of students from the teaching at a department of a university. Say this department has 150 students. Then this population is finite also and small also. It is not large population. So, there is no need to go for a sample survey. One can go for census, meaning that one has to collect the opinion of all the 150 students in the department to find their satisfaction level from the teaching at the department. So, in this case, where the population is finite but small, we do not require to make samples. Rather, we can go for the study of all the population, all the universe of our study, which are the students in any department, and we can seek the opinion of all the students in the department, their opinion about the teaching quality of the department. So, here in this case of infinite and small population, no need for making sample. But there are also cases or instances where the sample is wasted. Once it is checked, it becomes useless. Then there also we need to study through sample. Because the testing of the population results in waste of that item or population. So, if we test the whole of the population, nothing will remain. So, for example, we are cooking rice. One of us is cooking rice. When we think that now it should be complete, then what we do? We do not check each and every rice. Otherwise, there will be no rice left for us to eat. So, what we do? We put a spoon in the pot and from there collect randomly, of course, 2 or 3 pieces of rice, and we press those rice. By pressing those rice, we conclude whether the whole pot is well cooked and the stove should be put off, or whether still some cooking is left, and then we should continue it for some more time. That decision is taken with the help of only 2-3 rice from the whole pot, and the findings generalized for the whole of the pot. So, if we go on checking each rice whether its cooking is over or not, then we will have no rice left to eat. It will all be wasted in checking. So, here this sample is necessary. This is the natural example where we are doing it daily in our daily business. So, if in such cases where the population members of the population are or the items are going to be wasted, remain of no use after the checking, then also we go for the sampling, as we gave the example. Further, if suppose we have some problem in our body and the doctor writes so many tests for say dengue, malaria, whatever it is. So what happens? They do not check each and every drop of the blood. If they do that, the patient will have no blood and his all blood will be wasted in the testing and he may collapse also. So what is done? A sample is taken for say one small syringe or 1 by a quarter of the syringe or half of the syringe, maybe 1 milliliter, 2 milliliter of blood is taken and this blood is tested for say typhoid or for say dengue or malaria, whatever it is the doctor has written, and based on the findings in this blood sample, there is generalization for all of the body. So in case here also in the same case, the units of population would be destroyed once they are put to the testing. This is why we observe in our daily life that a sample is taken from the blood and the result generalized for whole of the body. So with this discussion, we might have arrived of some idea why sample has to be taken. In the case of infinite population or in the case where the sampling units are getting wasted, this is a compulsion. There is no way but to go for a sample study, make a sample and go for a sample study and generalize the findings of the sample for whole of the body. Whereas if the population or universe is large but finite, there also it is not possible to go for the study of all the population because of limitation of finance, because of limitations of the human resource and limitations of the time. So there also a sample has to be taken and the findings are to be generalized for whole of the population. But of course, in cases where the population is finite but lower, finite but small, then in such cases it is recommended that we should go for a census study, that is studying the each and every member of the population, soliciting and seeking opinion of all the members of the population, like we did in the case of studying the satisfaction level of students from teaching at a particular department where the total enrollment is only 150. So, it is better recommended, and there is no need for going for making sample, but we should go for a census study, that is for seeking the opinion of all the members of the population. So, the the sample serve us in many ways. The large population cannot be studied in the in for the reasons of size, time, cost, or inaccessibility that we have already discussed. Population in many cases may be so large and scattered that that is for the large and finite population. And here we have given the example of the Maruti Udyog, who produces cars and vans. So, if we have to study that they are spread all over the country, even abroad also, and they may be in millions in different cities, and of course, it would not be proper, rather advisable to go for a census study. In this case, we have to make a sample. Of course, making samples, we must be careful that the sample is representative of the population, and the characteristics of the population are reflected by the the in the sample also, and this is why the generalization of findings of the sample is not going to be any difficulty, is not going to be to produce any difficulty. So, the sample, it offers high degree of accuracy because it deals with a small number of persons. Most of us had blood samples taken, sometimes from the fingers and sometimes from the arm or another part of the body. So, in a short period of time, valid and comparable results can be obtained by studying the sample. A lengthy period of data collection generally renders some data obsolete by the time the information is complete in the hand. For example, collecting information on the attitudes of the military personnel about non-availability of vehicles to be used in very cold areas during the Cold War, the Kargil War, or voters' preferences during election period, or demanding action against police personnel responsible for using violence against women demonstrators, or for making a large number of accused persons in the police lockup blind. So, if these are the cases, there we will find that the sample is must. It is because if we go on collecting the data, the relevance of the topic, the relevance of the problem will change. So, the time is very limited in such cases, and so we have no option but to go for a sample study. It is also economical. The budget constraints. Large population would involve employing large number of interviewers, which would increase the total cost of the survey. So, if we go for studying the whole of the population, then it would be the human resource required, the surveyors required, and their payments would be very large, and our budget cannot afford it. And this is why, and many research projects, particularly those in quality control testing, require the destruction of the items being tested. And if the manufacturer of the electric bulbs wishes to find out whether each bulb met a specific standard, there would be no product left after testing. We have given the examples of the patient. We have given the examples of rice. These also in the same light, because there are many examples or many problems which we study, in which items which are being tested get destructed, as in the blood test, as in the testing of the cooking of rice. So here the electric bulbs. So if that is not taken into consideration, then it would become a joke of the research. And this is why the sample is a part and parcel of the research study. In future lectures, we shall be discussing the various aspects of sampling. Thank you very much.